Hi, everyone. My name is Amory Nelson-Bogle, and I'm the Vice President of YouTube Ads Marketing at Google. And I'm excited to be here to talk with each of you today about YouTube and the unique opportunities that it has for brands, for agencies, and for creators. Now, something you may not be aware of is that this year marks a significant milestone for YouTube. It's our 20th anniversary. Can you believe 20 years of YouTube?
No.
But what's amazing about this milestone is that over the past 2 decades, it's truly become a global force in culture, a place where the most influential voices connect with their audiences and where major moments bring these really passionate communities together. YouTube is what it is, thanks to creators, fans, as well as the brands that use it. And creators are defining this new era of entertainment. They become the new Hollywood, starting studios, launching new news channels, launching new formats, and building media empires. And what's amazing about this is that fans really can't get enough of it. Billions are watching YouTube content across screens and any format that you can truly think of, and allows them to really dive deep into the things that they care about and are most passionate about. And this, of course, creates unmatched opportunities for brands and for agencies. And it's more than just reach or relevance. It really is a unique and genuine opportunity to grow influence with new audiences and become part of this culture. With that, let's hear how our amazing panelists and their teams are using YouTube and get right into the conversation. I'm joined by Jon Youshaei, YouTube creator, Jason Horowitz, Senior Vice President of US Marketing at Mattel Group, Christine Schrader, Vice President of Strategic Innovation at Wpromote, Dan Sutton, the Vice President of Global Marketing at Riot Games, and Shana Kohen, Executive Vice President at Carat USA. Welcome, everybody.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you. So, Jon, I'm going to start with you.
Okay, hot seat.
Hot seat, yes. You're going to open the floor for everybody.
Let's do it.
Tell us about your journey as a YouTube creator. I mean, what made you get started? What lessons have you learned as a creator over the years? And any lessons that can apply to brands?
Yeah, I used to work at YouTube for 5 years and then worked at Instagram for 3 years. And something happens when you work with creators, like in your day job and just like helping them. You begin to spend your nights and weekends wondering, maybe I could do this too. Maybe I should try this. And I remember talking to a lot of creators about them going from like creating being a side hustle to their main hustle.
Yeah.
And you know, I'm pretty risk averse, I gotta admit. Like, I'm a kid of immigrants, like coming to Google, like working here was a dream job. So I knew that if I was gonna leave my job, it wasn't just to leave to become a creator, it was to start a studio.
Yeah.
And I pooled some savings and left and have not looked back, and now we have a 9-person team, and YouTube is the heart of our content and what we're building. And there's so many opportunities, from like filming with creators to just the other week I was like filming with Will Smith, and like things that I never thought I could imagine being possible are happening because of YouTube.
Now, for everyone else on the panel, as marketers, you partner with a lot of different channels to reach your target audience as well as to accomplish your business goals. How does YouTube integrate into your overall marketing strategy, and what does it serve that other platforms might not? So, anybody want to start?
Sure, I could go. So I think what's really interesting about YouTube for us is Mattel is an IP company, right? So we have brands that we think of as intellectual properties, right? And what's really unique about YouTube is that it's a storytelling platform, right? Not just an advertising platform, speaking from a marketing standpoint. So for us, for families with kids, it's the #1 platform for content consumption. That's like a fact, right? And what's great about it is we're able to really do storytelling and build brand love and character love, in addition to also doing you know, advertising, looking at it as an advertising platform. And that role that it plays, I think, is really unique, because I think, you know, storytelling is more emotionally impactful and really could build more brand affinity than even great advertising. So the fact that you can do both of those things on the platform, I think, is really valuable.
I mean, I would say, like, from a storytelling perspective, right, you talk about like the breadth of YouTube, right? So the most intimate kinds of storytelling on shorts with creators, right, like all of these different kinds of things coming together, along with the biggest screen in the room, right, when you're at home, like TV, right? So there's so many different ways to leverage YouTube. And, you know, for us, we're an agency, we work with a lot of different kinds of brands. Being able to explore that full spectrum of storytelling, I think, is really critical, and have accountability behind it too, because like there's this measurement component, et cetera. So YouTube sits in the middle of so many different teams teams, right? So many different disciplines in marketing. There's obviously the social part, the influencer and creator part, the programmatic part and connected TV part, right? There's all of these different things, and even newer ones, right? Like search has always been a part of YouTube. It's becoming more and more something that brands are focused on, because it's really about having a lot of options for your audience about how they want to be able to interact with the brand, both bringing in new voices, right, from the creator perspective, and also having a lot of different platforms with which to like engage and interact and really be part of their lives. And I think that's really what sets YouTube apart on its 20th anniversary, right?
Yeah. I think something that you just brought up is interesting, and not that I want to start with a challenge, but something that you brought up in terms of YouTube being part of lots of different teams is a challenge, and maybe why some advertisers and agencies are not using it to its fullest, because it is part of the search team and the video team and the social team. Maybe it is difficult to change the agency structure and the way we're structured, but I think as brands and understanding brand by brand, how important is YouTube as a platform for your business, and is it worth really restructuring everything so that you have one person, one team thinking about the full spectrum, going from like advising our clients on their Google channel, on their YouTube channel, or all the way through measurements?
For me, building games today, there's intersection of music, building IP, building characters, building potential, sub-brands. YouTube's at the heart of everything we do, because you might be playing a game and you want to learn more about how to play that game, and I need long format to do that. We may make a music video because that partners with an artist that's relevant to the genre we're making, and then that needs a place to live. And it can live within inside of our game client, which actually is the YouTube video, usually linking out, or I need the fastest path to play. So on mobile, maybe I just want you to install the game, and I use YouTube that way as well. So it's the center of most of what we're doing where I work, which is it's the first thing people think about is what are we doing on YouTube that day to talk to our players.
I mean, you all touched upon a lot of interesting, I would say, points that we discuss with clients and with the industry, which is the fact that YouTube taps into a lot of different formats. So whatever format people want to consume video in, you can find it on YouTube. It also allows you to talk to the consumer across the journey, whether they're streaming, scrolling, shopping, searching, that can happen on YouTube. So this is why for us, we've really, our handshake with the industry is that there's only one YouTube, because of the fact that it does, touch upon all these different elements. And so we'd love to hear from each of your perspectives. What does that mean to you? What does it mean to your audiences, to your businesses?
We all know what complex media landscape we're all navigating and operating in, and just working with so many different partners, so many solutions that are all really important and play an important part. But it's like a puzzle that we have to put together for our clients. And I think that's really the huge benefit that YouTube being a single platform brings to clients, which is serving different needs that they have. But it's really working smarter versus harder, and I think that that's a huge value that it brings.
I need freedom to do different things. One of those things is we make extremely complex games. These games take thousands of hours for many players to master. I need long format, I need short format, I need the ability to come to you and talk about something that maybe Google's going to help me develop, or some new latest ad tech that I have a unique need for and I'm willing to try. And so everybody outside of China knows YouTube. So for me, every single game we make is going to have a large YouTube strategy.
I also think one thing that's interesting is, there's only one YouTube, but YouTube is not one size fits all. And I think that's kind of what we're talking about, this sort of Swiss Army knife that is YouTube. Partially because of that history, right? Like they've been in this space, they are the thing that sort of birthed creator culture to begin with, right? And so they're very established there, but they also have, Google behind them, and this idea of being able to spread out into new environments that I think, some of the other players in these spaces have struggled to break out of their, original value proposition, I would say, in a way that YouTube hasn't. I read a Business Insider article just like a week or two ago, and the case was, think of YouTube like a utility, because the platform isn't central to the way all of these consumers, all of these people, all of these users are interacting with it. They're looking for the content they want, and that content is on YouTube. That might be a podcast. That might be the kind of complex long form video you were talking about. That might be the creators that they're looking to engage with and scroll. They might be searching for a product to do some, initial discovery, et cetera. And I think as long as we think of like brand is dynamic, right? And I think that's like a newer concept. And at Wpromote, that's really what we're focused on is brand is dynamic, just like the environments they're in are dynamic, the audiences they're trying to reach are dynamic. And YouTube provides so much more flexibility for brands that then they can, to your point, meet people really where they are, where the point for marketers might be the platform, but for the actual audience, it's the content they're looking for, and that content is on YouTube.
Yeah, so as a marketer, I agree with all that. And when you think of for families with kids, it's the #1 platform, right? In terms of both share, in terms of content viewership, right? And there's so many things that are unique and great about it for a marketer. Like you said, the fact that you could do long form content, you could do short form content, you could do shorts, all those different things. The other thing that I love is the immediate feedback from your audience, not only of how is all of the content that you're creating performing relative to each other, also to kind of understand how you're doing in a competitive context. So it really allows us to make sure that our brands are top of mind, you know, that we're growing continually year over year, and that's really valuable.
And I would add, as a creator, YouTube has more formats, which means that I have more creative expression and creative freedom. Like, where else can I go and put out a short that gets 49 million views, that's a man on the street, and then put out a highly produced in-studio podcast with Mr. Beast that gets 3 million views? Like, YouTube to me like gives that freedom and gives that flexibility to experiment, to test, go from short form to long form. And then as like we work with more brands, like they're coming to us and be like, okay, Jon, can you give us a long form video, a short, a community post, and all of that being housed within YouTube makes it all the more likely that we're able to have one conversation on one platform with multiple different formats.
I mean, thank you all for answering that question, and it I would say lends us nicely into the next question, which is, you know, talk to us about the impact that you've seen from running campaigns on YouTube. How is YouTube driving results for your brand and or your clients?
Well, I could share a really tangible thing that we do, which is we have a very robust MMM that we use, and in that we're putting all the variables of our YouTube content into that. And we see very consistently that YouTube is one of the leading contributors to POS from our media, and that gives us the confidence that, you know, what we're doing on YouTube makes sense, and we're trying to, you know, grow those contributions year over year. And there's lots of other really detailed things we could do within that MMM to figure out what should our viewership targets be in order to support our business results. So that's been really valuable.
I think one of the things to bring in is like measurement's important, right? Like it's really critical. We, you know, for agencies, right, we sit right in the middle of that. We need to be able to prove out, right? Like, is this working for your business goals and aligning with that? And I think for us, right, really being able to see through incrementality, like the actual impact YouTube is happening has been really, really critical, especially for brands that are, you know, maybe more performance minded, but know they need to go up the funnel. YouTube can act as that gateway to understand that. And then we're looking at our media mix model to understand what needs to go there. We're looking at incrementality to understand the true impact and really prove it out, not just to the CMOs we work with, but to the CFOs that are like, want to know how they're actually spending. And the other piece is that data also becomes inputs, right? It's not just output, like, okay, we've measured this, it's good. That gets into that dynamic conversation with being able to pivot, right? To understand, okay, this is working. That video worked, this one was less so, like why, right? And we've actually worked with Google. We have a proprietary like tech platform called Polaris to co-develop something called Creative Audit, which is specific to YouTube. So Polaris Creative Audit is taking Gemini and it actually goes through all of the video, right, like content that you have for YouTube according to two things: YouTube best practices, like what actually works on the platform and the different types of content you can do on YouTube, and your brand best practices. What are you saying the brand needs to do? And so you get this really nice feedback loop, right, where data isn't just about one thing, right? It's really getting into the creative of it all and trying to learn from it continuously. So you're doing that up and up and up, right, as opposed to having to, you know, stop, figure out, is it working? Is it just reach? We're trying to look beyond that to really attach it to business impact and how we can continue to improve that continuously.
And one thing I'd love to ask as a follow-up question is, when you think about, you know, the conversations you're having with those more performance-minded brands or marketers, what's some of the biggest surprises they see when they do decide to move up the funnel and incorporate YouTube into their?
I think one of the biggest things is if we're really able to capture in the upper funnel the halo effect on YouTube. So some of those are, you know, signals like share of search and stuff changing, et cetera, like those proxies that we're looking at. But to your point with like media mix modeling, right, is being able to bring it into that whole and really see that It's not channel by channel, right? YouTube has a halo effect over all media, right? Depending on what we're actually doing. And I think that can be a surprise. But I think the other thing when we talk about flexibility on YouTube is, you know, you can pair with, you know, affiliates, influencers, et cetera, to sell directly. You can bring product feeds into YouTube, et cetera. And so you can, you know, both feed the performance engine, right? But really widen that aperture of who's going to end up in your performance engine. You can get to the right people, right? Like there's the targeting capabilities, et cetera, and actually move them down the funnel as opposed to just being like, well, I hope that worked, or just looking at views, right? For performance marketers, they need to understand how that connects through.
Okay, thank you for sharing. Any other?
If I can add that, I really encourage brands to use the brand studies that are offered by YouTube, because outside of the MMM, which I think is the key indicator of sales, and so that's wonderful. But I think combining that with what we get through foot traffic insights and then just brand, one of our airlines has seen an increase in ad recall by 8% specifically with the Select product. And then we were also able to increase our efficiency and drive a lot more reach by changing a few things. We optimized the phasing, so we decided to just try to dictate less to the machine what it needed to be and just allow it to optimize. And we also decided to add YouTube Shorts. And just a huge plug for YouTube Shorts is it just wasn't in our consideration until I kept on hearing my 11-year-old son who was like, YouTube Shorts, YouTube Shorts. I'm like, why isn't this part of our recommendation? So by adding that had I think a 30% increase in our reach.
One build I would add, you know, I started with the MMM, which is the macro, and that's really important, but want to reiterate what you said. Like the other thing that I think is really valuable about the platform is that you get really quick creative learnings on an asset or a series level. So for us, from a content standpoint, we're doing series throughout the year, sometimes we're doing long form, and we're doing a ton of shorts. And you could learn right away that, ooh, this series is popular and resonates with the audience, or this one didn't land, and then kind of pivot your creative in a much kind of faster way, informed by the audience, and then I think you could do with other platforms.
With other platforms.
We do that as well on the creator side. It's like we test out platforms on Shorts, and then we're like, okay, that's hitting, that's working. Let's invest more dollars and make it a more highly produced long form. So I totally agree.
And it mitigates the risk, right? And I think that a big point there around like barrier to entry, we were talking about performance, like brands, et cetera. You know, when these cultural moments happen where you're like, well, I'm not going to buy a Super Bowl ad, right? Like if I'm a performance-minded brand, et cetera. I think those quick learnings that can like, you know, ratchet you up the funnel, get the buy-in from your organization to be able to do more on the brand side are really critical. And I think the other thing to mention, you know, specific products, et cetera, like things like mastheads, et cetera, around, you know, the moments that matter to your business where you're really able to, you know, I know they say Reddit, they like to say Reddit is the front page of the internet, but people don't read newspapers anymore, right? Like they really want to see like where the action is, and being able to inject yourself into those conversations in real time, right? Really understand how that works. And we've seen such great lift from some of those when you find that right match of brand to moment to creator, right? Whatever that looks like in a specific time.
I love that. And you know, this actually is a great point that you're touching on, which is culture. What we're seeing, and we've seen this over time, I'm sure you've all seen it in your individual areas, is that nothing in the world is really happening in culture or otherwise without it happening on YouTube. And what's amazing about that is it now creates endless ways for brands to be part of it, big, small, and everything in between. So, you know, how do you think about cultural moments for your individual industries? And how do you think about showing up in ways that allows you to connect with leaned-in audience, leaned-in fans during these moments on the platform?
For me, culture is conversation.
Yeah.
And I love the fact that like people are watching YouTube on TV more than ever, because that means they're likely watching it with other people.
Yes.
So when we see people tag our show, it's like, hey, we're watching like, you know, Jon Youshaei's like podcast. Like they're tagging it on their big screen. And like they're watching it with other people, and I'm like, how amazing is that we are being watched on this like platform that like so many other highly produced shows are, and that conversation kind of permeates throughout culture. And also just bringing guests on our show that we had a chance to work with more and more creators and celebrities that, hey, like have something coming up or they have an announcement, and then we'll work with them ahead of time and then launch on that day that they're about to go on a tour or have a book come out, have an album come out, have a channel like launch. So, and YouTube is at heart of the conversation of like, can we have an episode out on your channel as part of the launch strategy?
Okay.
Building on Jon, For us, in a unique situation, manage marketing for video games, but also for esports, live events, music, concerts, and even film premieres and TV. So the flexibility of being able to do exactly what Jon said, which is like have pre-show before it's going to go live on YouTube, bringing creators in actually from their space to help us get the word out, and then be able to have behind the scenes pieces then go on top of that the next day, or the breadcrumb around that kind of stuff. Or for esports, some of our players may be like, what is esports? I love your game, but I've never decided to watch. We bring in music, we bring in the live telecast of that, and then they're able to get a chance of seeing a thing that maybe they wouldn't go spend money to take a ticket to Germany to go watch this live, but they get the opportunity to see it, and then we're thinking about everything else around that moment within the game, within maybe our other channels that we want people to get the spotlight on at that moment in time.
For our brands, like, being a part of culture is part of the mission statement, being part of the cultural conversation. You think of a brand like Barbie, we have a calendar throughout the year where we're doing things aligned with culture and hopefully creating culture, right? Or we also have a business called Mattel Creations, which is for like our adult fans, where the people that we partner with internally, we actually refer to them as cultural curators, right?
Okay,
and it's partnering with artists and people are making that. So what's great about YouTube, I think, are two things. One is you can really kind of read the trends, and then because you can see those results in real time, it keeps you honest that you are actually a part of the cultural conversation. That people you're having high view-through rates and things like that people are liking what you're saying, and that you're a part of the cultural conversation. I love that, to keep you honest, and then also that could help you predict where things are going and partnerships that you want to do, whether it's with creators or influencers or cultural curators.
I love that.
Well, one of the things I think that's interesting about culture is it's both collective, and I think that's what we're focused on as brands. I think we think of culture as inherently collective, and that's obviously a huge critical part. It's also very specific. It's identity based. It's yours, and so we talk about that big to small, right? Like some of those more personal moments that are the most intimate thing, right, is your phone in your hand and watching it in that environment, and then the things where we're all watching together in front of the big screen. Both of those are being hit in the YouTube environment, depending on what that cultural moment is. Is it something private, like, we work with a lactation company, right, that is really helping mothers. That's very intimate. It doesn't mean that culture is not part of it, right? They might not be watching that content on the big screen, right? But we also have amazing things like we work with Peacock, so NBC streaming service, and it reminded me of this because they came out with Twisted Metal, which was a video game, version of a video game, the show version of the video game, and one of the big things there is that's not their regular, obviously there's overlaps between entertainment and video games, et cetera, but being able to work with creators to break through in a much more authentic way around a video game property that has a lot of beloved fans, right? People remember it from back in the day. There's a lot of kind of cultural capital of a lot of different kinds in there. And so being able to really break into new communities instead of always having to just paint with the broadest brush to get eyeballs. We're not just trying to get eyeballs, right? We need to mean more to more people, not just get more people to look at us. And I think that's so attractive from the brand side. And like you talk about some of the, Mattel sort of really trying to make a connection with these different audiences and being very thoughtful about what that looks like. And that injects the personal into culture. And so when your brand can be both personal and widely collectively relevant, you're getting the best of all worlds there.
At Carat, we're deeply interested in better understanding culture and the influence and impact with brands. And so we just launched it's called Carat Cultural EQ. I wanted to make sure I don't mess it up. But it's a new methodology. It's a proprietary scoring that we have. It's really around better understanding the influence that we can have. And what we have found is that your cultural EQ is a better indicator of a brand likeness. So that's a huge update for us at Carat.
That's great. I love that.
Awesome.
It's all about quantifying the unquantifiable, right? Like a lot of times we're using numbers for proxies and they're really important, but I think that's such a great point to be able to actually make that case to brands.
Yeah, I mean, another way I would say that we've been focused on a lot is with how fragmented things have become, the creative itself is more important than ever before, right?
Right.
And we all have a tendency to focus on the media plans and really scrutinize the media plans and looking at all the metrics, but a media plan is only as good as the creative you put into it. And again, that's another great thing about YouTube, that whether it's an advertisement or a piece of content, you're getting immediate feedback on how that creative's resonating.
We just touched upon creative. And when you think about your approach to creative and how you build creative for different platforms, I would love to just hear how each of you think about creative for YouTube. Do you build for YouTube? Do you build for others and then put the creative on, build for other platforms and then put the creative on YouTube? And what are the learnings there? And last question, what advice would you have for brands based on your experience?
I need to be able to get people from a creative I make to a mobile, or a creative on TV to console, or a creative in general to drive interest in checking out our game client or checking out a game on a store. And so we are making creative specifically for each of those moments because we have seen how important it is to be, for a recent launch we had for console for PlayStation, being on connected TVs through Google TV, making YouTube content there and having it be directly something that people can go into. They're already at their TV, now they can go download there. On mobile, we're late to the mobile game as a game company. We didn't spend as much time there. Now we've realized how much more that content has to be so specific to that moment. It has to be quicker, it has to be really snappy, and it has to have a really clear call to action, because people don't watch a mobile ad and then 12 hours later be like, I should go download a mobile game, right? And so those are the kinds of things that we've really been working on, and it's a strong part of how we think about launching creative and testing creative.
Okay.
We can adjust it quickly after that and find out what was working and not working.
So from another marketer perspective, YouTube is a must-win area, so we wanted to build a sustainable competitive advantage there. So we invested in a team that's focused just on strategy for YouTube, where they're evaluating the trends and what's going on with the audience, and obviously looking at the performance of our own brands. And then we have an in-house creative team that is developing all of the concepts for our content creative, and then all of the other pieces that go with that with measurement. So very heavily invested in having a team of creative experts that are literally YouTube creative experts to make sure that our content is most resonant on that platform with the audiences.
And what's the impact that you've seen from that approach?
Oh man, I think that the impact's huge. Like I said, we know definitively from our MMM work, from a macro standpoint, that YouTube is one of the largest contributors to our POS in terms of our product sales. But I also think in the more intangible way, it really helps build our brand affinity and our brand strength. And it also helps us see how we're measuring up versus the competition, right? So we're growing our viewership year after year and kind of evaluating all those factors. But I'd say the impact's been huge for us.
Great.
Yeah, it's interesting because before you were like, your media plan is only as good as your creative, right? I would almost take it a step farther. There is no media plan without creative, and I think the interesting dichotomy there between what comes first, the chicken or the egg, between like a media plan and creative, is really breaking down the barriers to when you're media planning, when you're looking at creative concepts and ideating around that, right? Those two things have to happen hand in hand, right? Like there has to be an understanding of what, obviously the audience insights are on top of all this, and they're dictating, what concepts are going through to creative, and they're also dictating what platforms you want to show up on from a media mix perspective. But even further than that, it used to be, I think, like Mad Men style, like creative's happening in a vacuum over here, and then you kind of figure out what to do with it. That conversation has to happen in real time, cross-functionally, right? Like you have to have media people that understand how creative is pushing media, especially, to your point, as creative is more and more important at as the new targeting, right? Like that's how you actually, get in front and an audience member feels like, oh, you see me, you get me, right? Here I am. So creative becomes so critical there, and with all of the plethora of different ways you can show up on the big screen, on the small screen, in a scroll environment, et cetera, you really have to think through what that actually is going to feel like from the user perspective. And so if you're kind of making this one conversation instead of two conversations, that then you try to twist creative to work in a media environment, or the media itself is not sort of suited to the concept that's been put together. And that's where that flexibility is so important. If it's not working, you have the opportunity to make that change. And I think the thing you were talking about all of the different channels, because we're talking about YouTube today, but nobody's just doing YouTube. YouTube's not in a vacuum, right? Consumers are in this whole environment and ecosystem of different channels. And we're looking at it from the perspective of, we want to get everything out of these channels that we can. So is there affinities between YouTube Shorts and TikTok and Instagram Reels? Sure, right? But some of those things are made directly for YouTube Shorts for a purpose and repurposed, and sometimes that goes the other way, right? Something that was made for TikTok and repurposed. But I think like the biggest thing is really understanding, right, that even those environments that are similar, Shorts and TikTok and Reels, for example, it's not the same necessarily audiences on those, right? It's not just one size fits all because the format or the specs are the same. And I mentioned the tool that we have, Polaris Creative Audit. Part of what that does too is I can upload my YouTube short there, and I can see here the best practice for YouTube isn't measuring up. Here's what we said we wanted from the brand side, and then I can click down and go, okay, for Instagram Reels, what changes about what I'm saying from the brand side on Reels, and what's changing from what the best practices are on platform. And we can see like, how do we need to change this video? How do we need to make sure that it's going to be built for that platform? And I think that that's really important to kind of both look at cross-channel learnings and understand what works individually and really look at it on a platform basis from both sides.
That's really smart.
If I could add one thing.
Yeah.
I also love that YouTube is the intersection of content and creative and community. So oftentimes we'll ask our audience about certain formats and topics, literally using the community tab and polling them, and they'll give us this feedback in real time. We'll see the feedback on YouTube Studio, and we're able to evolve and adapt our content from video to video, where sometimes it'll take much longer on other platforms. And then also seeing that feedback come in the comments, it's just this living, breathing thing that has allowed us to like progress in ways and put out stuff that would otherwise like take years in other traditional formats.
I was gonna say, are you like surprised often? Like, are there stuff that this is way more popular than you thought it would be, or things that are much less popular than you thought it would be?
Sometimes we did this format where we brought a YouTuber's biggest video and we put like a top-down like rig. So we were like basically with a like pencil like freeze framing it and like breaking it down. And we did a video like that with Mr. Beast, and that got 2.6 million views, which was more than the podcast that we did with him at the time. And that was just an idea that we were throwing out, like, hey, let's just do this 20 minutes afterwards. And now we've done that with creators breaking down their biggest YouTube videos. And because we saw that like in real time, we're like, okay, let's make this a format in our show and like add it as part of a breakdown in addition to a sit down. That's awesome. Yeah.
Well, that leads nicely into my next question, which, what we're seeing today is that for more and more people, watching TV means watching YouTube. According to Nielsen, we've been #1 in watch time for the past 2 years. So, Jon, as a creator, how does your approach change when you think about content creation and how it's evolved on YouTube, especially with the growth that we're seeing on the biggest screen in the home?
Yeah, in so many ways, like, I think about the fact that we're on TV means that we're like competing with the biggest studios, some of the biggest shows, and our production quality and prep has to be right up there with them. And so like we have invested in like the best cameras, like even more than just like 3-4 cameras for a podcast or a sit down shoot, or if we're doing BTS documentaries now that we're doing more of those, like I really want to make sure those feel like the highest quality documentaries that you could put out, and we put it on our YouTube channel. So the more and more like that becomes like the thing that people are sitting down watching. Like sometimes we'll have our videos watched for 30-40 minutes at a time. People are sitting back and they're watching with other people, they're commenting about it afterwards, and like I take their attention very seriously. And to me, like production value is really just a fancy way of saying like how much as a creator do you respect people's eyes and ears. Like, and like we think about the sound mixing, the audio, like every single frame of the video, and the fact that it's on TV means that like we're in the big leagues, and we're playing here. And like I talk with my editors, with our filmmakers, like this is where people are going to be watching us predominantly. Let's make sure we show up in the highest quality way possible.
And for your channel, where is your growth coming from? Is it the living room right now? And follow-up question to that is, how do you then think about, just like we were discussing earlier, families or multiple people sitting around a TV and watching your content? How does that also evolve your approach?
Yes, TV is one of the fastest growing platforms for us, and then internationally we're seeing a lot of growth, like thanks to like a lot of YouTube's tools that are allowing us to dub and have multi-track audio. But yeah, I really think about the fact that there's multiple people that could be watching our piece of content, and that's why we've delved more into like behind the scenes documentaries in addition to sit down interviews. I was just in London filming one of our next videos at Wembley Stadium for the Sidemen's charity match, which is this crazy moment where they've sold out Wembley Stadium, 90,000 people, to come watch a bunch of YouTubers like play football or soccer, and as I'm going through the documentary, the BTS, like as we're like recording it, I'm trying to get moments with the parents and their kids.
Yeah.
And like how they're both fans of the YouTubers who are on the field, because I know that there is a moment where a lot of people could be watching like from across different generations, and I hope to give them something of value in our BTS. So yeah, it's front of mind when we're producing our
Building
content.
on Jon, you know, the whole idea of families. You start this game maybe in college that we make, and then life happens. You get a job, and you don't have 30, 20 hours a week to do whatever you want.
Yeah.
So for me, YouTube's allowed me to take content and go longer form.
Yeah.
And so we did a series based on our game called Arcane, and it was on Netflix. But I had about 2 hours of behind-the-scenes footage that we had really documented well from a audio standpoint and clarity and how the show was even made. It wasn't really meant for a 1 hour thing as an addendum to the show on a streaming platform.
Yeah.
It made perfect sense for me to break it up into 6 episodes on YouTube. And somebody that's super into, oh my God, they worked with Imagine Dragons. We had an episode just about the music of the show.
Yeah.
Some people were asking the question on, I really want to understand how they did the animation for that, because it wasn't CG. We did an episode just on the production of the show and the animation quality. Then we had the behind the scenes of, why did a video game company spend 7 years making a show?
Yeah.
Like, what was your point? And we had
Yeah.
our founders talk about the moment in time where this idea went from a music video to maybe a 30-minute thing to suddenly becoming a 10-episode series. And YouTube gives me that place to put that for somebody who's the super fan, but also the person who maybe lapsed out of the game, because they got kids now and they're like, I can't play a 3-hour-a-night competitive video game, but they know the characters and they loved our brand still, or they loved that moment. Now I've got a place for them to watch some of it, maybe with their kids. And maybe that brings them into the next game we make because their kid got to watch this thing on YouTube that wasn't directly go play game, go buy now. It was just a connection point of something and high quality or fidelity wherever they were watching, but often it's on the TV now. And then that, maybe down the line I'm getting that person to come into our new game.
Oh.
If I can put my media investment hat for a second, I think that is the greatest hack for advertisers, the fact that YouTube doesn't charge more for CTV viewing. I think I said earlier that we were trying to dictate the devices that we were running on YouTube. Once we let it run fluidly and we said what our goal is, which is to get as much reach as possible, as many views as possible, we saw a huge majority of our impressions going towards CTV. And so what that did, and I hope you will never charge more for that, because on our end is really shift some of our CTV budgets, which was, the CPM was a lot higher, so we shifted that to YouTube, and we're able to do a lot more with our media budget.
We've actually had a really similar thing, right? I think YouTube for us in the CT environment is sort of in the center of a lot of media plans right now because of some of that. And I think that the other piece, that when we're thinking about how this is, I loved like the quality as a respect for the audience. I think that's really, really important. But I also, obviously CTV is a very continually fast-growing space, et cetera. But there's also this flexibility, again, when we talk about going up the funnel, et cetera. We participated in the first YouTube upfronts. Some of what really sealed the deal was this idea that, CTV advertising can be more flexible. It's not as iron, like linear TV stuff, and that brings back some of the original value proposition of YouTube, which is that level of flexibility and agility and dynamism. And when we're looking at how to be able to have media meet the moment on the big screen and the small screen, right? Like that gives us a lot we can do. And that might mean we're testing some things out, right? In shorter formats that we don't have to have, the 3-camera setup and make sure that the audio sounds like just right, like those more sort of authentic, organic moments. But a lot of them also have concepts behind them, right? When we're like, is this hitting? Does this then, do we then invest the time and resources to make this into something bigger? And I love how everybody up here has talked about that building over time, right? This worked, so then we did this. We realized that, so that became a series, right? Really, YouTube gives that opportunity, do what we all say as marketers we should do, which is like think across like different disciplines and understand how to build on things as opposed to just being like, what's the next thing and like moving on. It really is, and I think that's key to the community piece you built before. You're building a relationship, right? Like that's what your brand is out to do, is build a relationship. How does that come to life?
Great. Well, thank you all for sharing just your perspective and how you're thinking about your strategies, especially with YouTube's leadership in the living room. And you all touched upon this notion of communities and fans. And it's definitely something that is core to our platform. And what's great about that is that you can tap into almost any community and fandom on YouTube, from gaming to consumer products and more. So, Jon, I'm going to start with you first. How do you foster and maintain a passionate community on YouTube? And specifically, what strategies do you use to connect with your community?
Yeah, when it comes to viewers and fans, the biggest thing I think about is for every second that they watch, I probably have to put hours of work in to respect and deserve their attention. And so I think about if they're giving me like 20 to 30 minutes like watching our show, that probably took like days, if not months of prep.
Yeah.
And that's probably like overkill on my side, but I just think about how many options this person has, like what else they could be doing in their life, and the fact that they're taking time to watch our show, like I want to go above and beyond for them. And so we've done that in ways where, a lot of like shows and podcasts have simple like cut together trailers. Like I want to make our trailers feel like movie trailers. I want to make them like really good sound design, the graphics, like make them feel like they can stand alone on their own.
Yeah.
And like that has been something that we've seen like has brought like great returns and like more like people like watching our show and building our community. And then just like thinking about, okay, if somebody has commented something on a past video, or like at the end I'll be like, who else should I interview? Like what questions do you guys have? Making sure I give them a shout out or incorporate them into the next video.
Okay.
So it's this living, breathing thing that is just so fun. Like I've had more times on YouTube where as something is happening, I'm like, is this like real life? Like the fact that like this many people are watching, or that these guests are coming on the show, and just it's been an incredible journey.
Thanks for sharing that. For everyone else on the panel, how have each of you tapped into the passionate communities that you're finding on YouTube?
Because we're a global company,
Yeah.
we operate in over 200 countries. We have people that want to see stories about League of Legends in French. We have people that want to watch this very specific part of APAC for esports.
Yeah.
And it's hard to maintain all those channels at once, but we realize like there is enough people that want that. And it doesn't have to be, for me in that case, trying to get the biggest amount of subscribers to that channel. It has to be, am I giving a space for content that people want, that we're already making 9 times out of 10.
Right, right.
And I have a place for them to go and kind of be their community. And I think it leads to us learning a lot about places that have been great investments and places that haven't. And what do I do with that information now that I've seen, wow, France is really blowing up with Valorant esports? Am I doing enough with it? Because it's easy on a budget to be like, maybe we won't do French translations this year because everybody's saying be more efficient. And then I look at it and I'm like, if we stop doing French translation on this particular product, I think we're going to actually upset that community greatly. Of course, we're going to hear about it because of Reddit and everything else. But I think that's been amazing. It's a channel and an opportunity space for me to give big to small communities a place that they can go for content.
I love that. So you're not only just tapping in, you're thinking about the entire spectrum of fandom, but you're also narrowing on your specific fans as well too. And as a marketer myself, like brands want to build fans. That's the goal. That's why we market, and that's why we think about kind of how to evolve our strategies over time. And you made some great points around how brands should think about the platform also to like invest in their own brand communities and brand fandom. So anybody else have any examples that they want to share with regards to that?
I mean, what I like about what you said and as well that's really inspiring that I like about community on YouTube is you have to earn it, right? Because there's so much choice. And so even if you identify that people are interested in a particular thing, like if they're interested in some aspect of auto culture around Hot Wheels as an example, right? There's so much content, and there's so much content that people are making that aren't coming from the brands that it really forces you to set that really high creative bar, which you called respect, which I love. Next time I see a piece of creative I don't like, I'm going to say, this is disrespectful. There you go.
Start singing Aretha.
But I love.
We'll see it in YouTube Studio.
So I love you have to earn it, right?
Yeah.
And then the other thing that you said too that I love there as well is you have that community, and sometimes you could see that there are people who really like it, but you've earned it when that grows, right? So it's also that great acquisition tool if you're making content that's so good, and maybe that's also aligned with that trend spotting that you're doing,
Yeah.
you can now attach your brand to other trends and grow your audience and then grow your business.
Love that.
The other thing I'd say that I'm obsessed with that you said in particular, right, is this the listening back, right, which I think is an undercurrent of everything we're talking about, and like using some of that listening as like business insights, right, which I think is so important. I think a lot of times we think of marketing over here, right? Well, what does it tell us that there's this desire for French translations of a specific thing? And you know, I think the old school brand way, and I know I keep bringing it up, but you know, we're away from that now. But it's like handing down and imposing on what you think the audience should be thinking about, should be doing. And so that earning, right, is really critical. That listening is so critical. And I think that when you're really looking at, you know, these niche communities and establishing two-way conversation, so it's your customer has a seat at the table in the brand decision making.
Right.
That's enormous. That's very different from how it used to be. And you do have to build the right structures and, you know, ways of working in place and tools, right, to be able to spot those trends and listen to what's going on. That's incredibly important, but it really unlocks things that you wouldn't have had access to before, and then allows you to then pursue connection at scale, right? Like that is much closer to like a one-to-one, you know, like how does this feel to somebody? And then I love the idea of like the space opening up, right, to invite more people in, and having the brand not dictating that community, but really being the platform for that community. And isn't that then like very, very powerful and gives your, you know, not just your fans, but they feel a sense of co-ownership of that community with the brand, that level of trust and confidence in how that they're going to interact with you in the future or hand it down to their kids. I think that's really amazing, and like that's hard to do.
Yeah, it's hard. That is the opportunity for big brands or big clients, is like, how do you be nimble within the constraints of your operating model and how the company works, right? That's when I'm jealous of like creators. And, you know, you do something and it works, and you're like, all right, I'm going to change my content plan based on this, right?
Yeah.
Well, it's like you can't be everything to everyone, right? Like you can't be everything to everyone, and the better you feel about letting that go and really figuring out how to be the right thing for the right people and listen to what like they're actually needing, and sometimes get some surprises along the way that you might not have had in your initial planning, right? Like that is an immensely powerful moment in that time.
This gets me thinking about just consumers and how we often say, and we're seeing this, is that the consumer's journey is predictably unpredictable. And there's many different ways in which they're consuming video and you know, other digital media, from streaming to scrolling to searching and shopping. And what we're seeing is that like Google and both YouTube influence consumers across that entire journey. So when you think about, you know, the fact that it is predictably unpredictable, that they're consuming across all these different modes simultaneously in some instances, how do you think about that when you think about YouTube? And then how do you then tap into YouTube to specifically meet consumers in all those different moments and across that journey?
I mean, I think first of all, I think, you know, by necessity, marketers think of a funnel, right? Like that's already, a lot of times we're reporting in that thing, we're thinking top of funnel, middle funnel. Like, I always feel there's something like inherently, like you're like cramming people down this funnel. Like that's a problem, right? We know that the customer journey isn't linear. We know that they're predictably unpredictable. And the more your media planning can take into account the touch points where you're not just, maybe like we like to say like you can report on the funnel, right? Like because that's where people place out, but like it's not media planning in like this cramming down the funnel way. We're looking at that wider spectrum. And I think that one of the big things that you have to take into consideration when you're looking at it holistically is that what worked today is not necessarily what will work tomorrow. So you're making sure even in your budgeting, right, that you have a certain amount of budget that is experimental, that is testing, that's looking at what's coming next, and have the right methodologies so you can kind of move things as needed. And like, the way we media plan, and this is kind of different than a traditional like brand approach, the way we media plan for a brand is we try to take like instead of 80% of the time, right, being spent planning and ideating and for 6 months we're like figuring this out, there's a place for that, but we try to make that 20% of what we're doing, like leveraging the right data points and stuff to like essentially build out brand hypotheses that then we want to get into market, because that's where we'll actually see if they're working, that's where they'll connect, and you don't fall into this sunk cost fallacy of being like, I swore I knew it would work and I like that idea and so I don't want to like take it back, right? You stay really in that conversation, earning how people are interacting, earning the attention of the people you want to interact with. and be able to pivot in real time. But if you don't have 10 to 20% of your budget testing what's working, what's going to work tomorrow, right? You will inevitably be behind the 8 ball at different periods, right? You can't be everything to everyone, but you're looking forward to see for the right people, right? Where is that opportunity sparking? And then how does that affect that agile media budget, agile media mix, the creative you're building for it, right? And be able to move into those areas and follow the customer journey instead of, again, trying to dictate it.
Right.
We set aside a innovation budget as well on the production and the creative side, and I would say that that's been crucial to pursue new things as they come out. So for instance, when we first started seeing Shorts really taking off, we had an innovation budget, and that's what allowed us to make the content to show up on Shorts. From a media buying standpoint, yes, always experimenting. But to answer your question of how does YouTube help with what I would say is the fragmentation, I think what I love about it is that it's device agnostic, right? That it shows up on all these different devices, and you could either tailor the buy or you could let it auto-optimize, and we do those both, and that's really helpful.
And I love that the journey can continue from device to device to device. Like, we'll see, we drop a video, and then over time the watch time just keeps going up, and that's, I think, because you could start watching it like on your tablet while you're having your morning coffee. Then, like, you know, throughout your day you watch it on your phone, and then you come home and you put it up on your TV and watch. And I love that YouTube keeps recommending that video, like if you keep watching it, like so you could finish it. Or people are saving and they're coming back to it. So I just love that the journey can go from device to device to device, from time to time to time throughout the day.
Because it's really about YouTube fitting into people's lives, right? Like that's sort of the way we've been talking about this, is that it makes it easy, right, to actually fit into what you're doing, again, instead of trying to like impose that on people. And because of that resonance, like, you know, I took a car here today, I was watching something on my phone on the way in the car. You know, being able to come here and, you know, have this conversation, and then when I get back in the car, I'm like, okay, let me pick up where I put, you know, pick up where I left off, because it fits into my life, right? And I think that is such an important piece of how part of it is just like YouTube has been around for 20 years, but it has never stayed in place, and it's never also abandoned what originally made it great. It has like been able to grow outward from there, and I think that has really, you know, kids do it now, right? Everybody like is on YouTube. It's not just like one person. Everyone is there, and that kind of goes back to that like YouTube as a utility that is like woven into the warp and woof of your everyday.
So building off of your point around, you know, fitting into people's lives, the way that brands are also tapping into that beyond just placing ads on their platform or having channels on our platform is by working with creators. And so, you know, creator partnerships and the work that we're seeing our YouTube creators do with brands has taken off. You know, I'd love to hear from you, Jon, as a creator, and I know you mentioned a few examples of working with brands, but how do you decide what partnerships to take on, and what makes for a good creator partnership?
As we've grown, that answer has changed, but now it's the brand, do they get our content? Do they want to be partners with us for multiple months and multiple videos, and multiple formats? So the most successful partnerships are, okay, when they come to us and like, we want to like have 3 to 6 episodes. We've had brands come to us and buy 12 episodes at a time. And we're with them throughout campaigns, and that means that I can put my creator hat on and think about, okay, what are the best episodes coming up throughout this long term that we could give to this brand that could align to, you know, their values or their talking points. And then at the same time, I could be putting on my marketing hat and being like, okay, they have this campaign coming up and it's trying to reach my audience. Let me give advice or some kind of like either product or marketing feedback to help make it resonate as much as possible. So the more long-term it is and the more across YouTube it is, we found that the more successful the partnership is.
And from everyone else, I'd love to hear examples of creative partnerships that you've done and what you've taken away from it. Any words of advice for those that are looking to work with YouTube creators?
I mean, from an advice standpoint for us, what we look at is audience alignment first, right? Like, does this have an audience that aligns or can help us expand our audience? Consistent values, which is really important because we have values-driven brands, and we want to make sure that that creator has the same values. And then almost can it enhance the creative? Right. So based on what that person does, can they, you know, talk about our brands in maybe a more authentic or a more compelling way? And when we kind of assess things that way, it usually is an alchemy that works. You know.
The other piece of advice I'd say with that is, you know, when you're looking at this, because we see this with brands sometimes, I'm sure you've seen this too, Like when brands want to just like say like, okay, this is exactly what we want. There's no room for discussion. Do it now, right, et cetera. And especially the long-term partnerships, I think, are so critical, building that trust over time. But I think, the thing I would say to brands is approach it like you are approaching an expert about a specific thing that you may not have the same, you probably don't internally at the brand have the same level of expertise, because that's how to get the best results, right? Not because you are handing down exactly what you want. You can do that in-house. If that's what you want to do, do it in-house. You're looking for a creator to actually have that level of expertise in their audience, in how the creative will show up on platform, and how to drive that engagement. So as long as you find that audience and value alignment, you can trust them to do things your brand can't do. And that's where in brand planning, one of the things you have to bring in now is voice, right? It's not just the brand voice coming down from on high. You need to have other voices, and what can they do that you can't? What will your community want to hear from them, but like it won't really fit right coming from you, and find those authentic ways of expressing it. And that has to go into your plan now. If you're not doing that, you're missing the boat. Even if your brand is perfect and looks great and everything is fitting together, you are really missing the third dimension of how your brand is actually interacting with audiences if you're not bringing that authentic voice characteristic to it.
Yeah, I just want to reinforce that 100%. Fewer talking points in the brief. That's always the biggest complaint that I get from the influencer team working with our internal marketing team before they get to the creators. When there's too many talking points in the brief, it ruins the creative, So, but that's why it's so important to make sure you're aligned from a values standpoint. So you're confident that that creator will kind of land on the mark,
And have that long-term relationship, because then you can grow over time, right? Like you're like, okay, like I know, they'll understand what kind of risks you're willing to take, right? You'll understand what kind of risk they might want to take, right? And really find that happy medium, and that's really fruitful over time.
It is.
I would also add that I really believe that creators today are modern creative agencies. And when we have those conversations with brands, it's not just about what's the video going to look like within our show and our episodes, it's how can you take that video and boost it as well. And so we're trying to think about producing the creative in a way that I think a creative agency does, and we're trying to take that and really create an integration that feels like it could stand alone but also make sense within the context of our video.
That's smart,
I love that.
We like to make sure that we treat creators not like media vehicles, but like true partners. At the end of the day, most of the products that I need audiences to see are video games. I need people to see that people like playing them. I need to see people learn from playing them, and they don't want to watch me play video games on a video. So I want that partner to feel like they've learned everything that they can. They can talk to our developers, they can talk to, the audio team, they can talk to the person who designed a character. We want them. But then I have to do something everybody's scared of, which is let go of complete control and trust that I value their audience and that they value us, and that they're not going to go too far. And look, after 10 years of doing this, there's many times they've gone too far. But it's funny because sometimes a creator will come up to us and have an idea for a way of showing maybe how to demonstrate our game better than we did, and we've actually gone and made those into YouTube pre-rolls because their version of explaining our game was clearer and more fun and more authentic to all audiences, specifically theirs, to the point where we're like, we should run that. And it's great because that wasn't the intention. The brief wasn't, please go make me an ad. The brief was, hey, we'd love to see you play these games and do it to your audience, and what can we do to provide help? And then we're looking at it and we're like, wow, they did a really good job of this super complex thing. But we trust that they know that because they know, like you do, what does this audience need? They need something that is quick, easy, and tangible as a content creator.
Well, and the great thing too is you could look at the messaging side by side if it's this, creator talking about this game and us talking about this game, and actually measure which one's doing better. Right?
We did.
I think to your point about creators being creative agencies, I think it's so important for brands and creators to work directly together versus, and maybe I'm not going to make friends of some of my fellow creative teams, but I think it's that, that connection is so important, so to really let them be the creative in the room.
You guys have shared so much wisdom, and I really want to thank you from, talking about how YouTube is the epicenter of culture, how you tap into that culture, to how you think about planning for YouTube, then to the communities that we're building and fans that you have on YouTube. It's such a rich ecosystem, and I love that each of you are finding ways to tap into it and build your businesses. So on that note, I want to thank each of you so much for joining me here today. I love hearing from each of you. Such an honor to have each of you here with us today. And with that, that's a wrap.
All right, thank
Thank
you.
you.
All right.